I have a problem with anime. I could just say I personally don't like fan service and leave it at that, but I think there's a much more nuanced underlying problem with anime as a whole that I want to talk about. There's been a lot of shows lately that have been told are great and amazing and suggested heavily, only to watch them and see fan service of minors right out of the gate. They could be really good shows. I'd argue there's a lot of shows that I've liked on some level that have weird shit in them. I just feel like it's so normalized now that people have completely tuned the weird shit out. I mean, anime's always had weird stuff in it. It just wasn't as popularized in the past, and there wasn't an endless sea of new shows to sift through. For some of you, I'm just immediately going to be labeled as woke or uncultured, but I genuinely want to try seeing this from both sides of the coin here. As an artist myself, I have no problem with individual artists drawing whatever they want. If someone complained to an individual artist that they only draw cute girls or whatever, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm just a guy. I'm sorry. I can't draw everything for everyone. I don't know how beards work. However, I do agree that it is my responsibility and how and where I share my artwork with other people. I want to be clear, what I'm talking about here isn't the idea of liking or disliking something. You're allowed to have whatever tastes you want. What I want to talk about is actual censorship, a fine line between harm and freedom of expression. Who should decide what anyone's allowed to see? Where's the line? How is anything even implemented? Also, Western shows have stupid shit in them too, I'm sure, but I haven't watched nearly as much of that, so I'll just stick with anime since it's what I'm familiar with. So, why censorship? Basically, if a certain form of media or art is harmful, it becomes a moral dilemma about whether or not people should have access to it. When we bring up morality, a lot depends on whether it's subjective or objective. Objective morality is like the word of God, unchanging and unrelenting. If it's objective, where's that coming from? Usually, religion is where people are taking objective morality from, but that changes culturally too. Think about something simple like taking a life. Objectively wrong, no? Now, think about taking a life in the military. A policeman stopping a crime, or someone shooting a healthcare CEO. Still objectively wrong? Subjective morality has more wiggle room and sways with different times and cultures. Let's say it's subjective, the consequences are still real. Like the impact is still there, but you end up with a bit of a slippery slope. Certain things also cause more or less harm to different people, and you can't really categorize everyone into every little box imaginable. Let's pretend for a second that fan service is like a garnish to the anime soup. I happen to have that weird gene that makes cilantro taste like actual dish soap. No matter how good the soup is, it just tastes like great soup with some dish soap in it. Doesn't matter how little dish soap there is, it's still dish soap. But some people don't mind cilantro. Some people even prefer cilantro in their soup. That doesn't mean that I get to take away cilantro for everyone forever, right? The problem is when people start putting other shit in my soup. And I'm over here like, bro, this tastes whack. I don't like this. And they say something like, oh, you must have the cilantro gene. Oh, well. And I'm over here like, dude, this isn't cilantro. This is pedophilia. But what impact does anime even have? Is it causing harm? Is there any specific audience that we should protect from it? As much as I love and want to protect her, anime isn't harming Kana. She's not real. But what about real children? Super hot take, I know, but children shouldn't be watching mature content. I'm pretty comfortable putting them in a box, and it's a box that they'll grow out of anyways. I personally started watching anime at a very young age, and I think a lot of people in my age group, I'm 29 by the way, have had a variety of unsettling interactions due to unfiltered internet access. I'm not sure about things nowadays. I hope it's gotten better, but when I was younger, anything anime was seen as like for children. Oh, that's like Sailor Moon, my parents would say as I watched fucking Elfin Lied on my family computer. I would argue that watching explicit anime at a young age, and also, being weird and autistic, really changed the way in which I interacted with the world around me for the worse. I saw all the jokes about consent, I saw characters being objectified, and it directly influenced how I acted around my peers. There was also a really common occurrence when I was younger where someone would show you inappropriate content to get a funny reaction out of you. Oh, go watch Two Girls, One Cup. Side note, please don't look that up. It's actually just shit and vomit. Please spare yourself the pain. But I think we can agree that children shouldn't have access to that sort of thing. But what about indirect harm? Well, my gut instinct is that pedos are watching the pedo show and that could indirectly harm real kids. It's important to recognize the difference between causation and correlation. For example, people who play violent video games are no more likely to be violent themselves. I didn't play God of War and then try to kill the gods because Kratos did it, right? Statistics show that sexual abuse of minors in Japan has actually declined despite the increase of lolicon media. However, that doesn't automatically mean content is harmless. Obviously, there's a difference between fictional content and reality. The law in Japan specifically mentions this, although where I'm from it's considered illegal. It's easy to think that because there isn't a direct victim, there's no real harm. But I would argue that it does have an impact on society and the people viewing this sort of content. Whether that harm is impactful enough to censor is really hard to measure. Watching certain stuff can normalize that to people and to yourself. You can get desensitized to the sexualization of young characters. I would argue that I was desensitized to it myself at some point. It took me way too long to realize the depiction of Kana wasn't just an adorable childhood crush on a cute character. I actively showed Dragon Maid to my friends without warning them about any of the weird shit in it, which I now think was a mistake. Glossing over the sexualization of minors when suggesting stuff to people is cringe. Normalizing things like this can make sexual abuse of real kids more difficult to identify and address in the real world. Normalizing viewing women as waifus can affect how some people interact with real human beings. Media can impact the way you view the world over time if you're not actively watching or thinking critically about it. At the end of the day, though, who decides what's harmful? Where's the line? There's a difference between disliking content and wanting to censor it. What about editing every single gay scene out of Arcane? Or canceling my favorite manhwa, Their Story? That's also censorship, but for something that I don't regard as harmful and therefore see as kind of over the top. I can only say the difference is that sexual depictions of minors and jokes about consent have directly impacted me negatively, while seeing queer content has impacted me in positive ways. So, who should be responsible for censoring content? The creators, your country, distributors, the viewer? I'd argue it's a shared responsibility. When we rely on just one of these, we kind of loop back around to why objective morality doesn't work. Japan isn't the only place where anime is available anymore. It's a global media. I'd say a bit of responsibility at least should fall on the creators. The crazy thing to me is that Japan actually has very strict laws and regulations around adult content. Drawings just seem to be in a weird loophole area. There's also your local laws, like, for example, while lolicon is legal in Japan, it's still illegal to watch here in Canada, which doesn't actually do much to stop it because the internet is a disaster and you can't have censorship without surveillance, which is creepy and dystopian. I love you, Google. Please don't hurt me. So, what about distributors of the content? Localization could be a solution, but I don't want to live in racist jelly donut world. And what about people watching the original version? I've lived through 4 kids making Sailor Moon incestuous rather than gay, and it's not better. Plus, with the internet, it's almost impossible to control what content people are seeing. We're never going to stop people from making and posting or viewing weird shit. So that leaves you and me, huh? The people viewing the content. I think it's okay to like something and also dislike parts of it. It's okay to stop watching something because it makes you uncomfortable. But being aware of what you're watching and holding yourself accountable and not normalizing or sharing weird shit, it would be neat, okay? There are certain websites that try to give more adequate warning on content, like unconsenting media, where people can post warnings about different subject matter. It's not perfect, but if you're a sensitive bitch like me, it helps. Using active and critical thinking when watching shows, understanding the impact that content can have on different audience, and being realistic when sharing stuff is good. It's okay to like something and admit that parts of it are harmful. It's not entirely your responsibility to censor content. Things definitely have room for improvement. But you do have the ability to protect yourself and your family. Please don't let your kids watch mature content. That's directly your responsibility if you're a parent. Ultimately, in the balance between artistic freedoms and harms, I've found myself strictly in the lolly is harmful camp. I don't think lolicon media, especially, should be readily available for people to see. I think it's icky, and if you watch it and defend it, I think you're icky too. Sorry.